Hi, Caitlin Hatch, and today we'll be talking about learning disabilities with a focus on reading, and towards the end we will have a lesson plan. Some facts about people who struggle with reading. 1 out of 5 students will have trouble with reading. 80% of those who are in special education will have trouble with reading. And adults who are illiterate, and those adults who are illiterate read below a 5th grade reading level, and they will tend to have low-income jobs. A child who may struggle with reading in the future has delayed or late speech, they cannot rhyme, and they are inattentive and move from one activity to another, and it's more often than other children. Contact your local director of special education or child find to get more information. If your child exhibits any of these signs, there are many more, but these are a few of them. Next is a balanced literacy program, which is reading with the child, organized explicit phonic decoding instructions and practice, guided reading with attention to comprehension, shared book and writing experiences, oral language development and listening experience, and sustained silent reading. If you want more information, visit the nationalreadingpanel.org, and that will give you the information behind the research. Phonetic awareness is understanding that spoken words and syllables are each part that make up a sequence of speech sounds. Children who have trouble reading cannot hear and manipulate these sounds spoken in words. And problems a child with phonetic processing might have is counting symbols and spelling out loud and on paper. So how can we teach reading when a child has a learning disability? First is to convince them they can read, which is more helpful if you have another student helping them. Step 2 is discuss and note what kind of rewards the child prefers. Like, note their interests and how can giving them a reward help them increase their reading. Determine what the child does or does not know. Find out what letters they know, what sounds they can make, and do more information following that. Make up words from the letters they do know and the sounds they know. Next is finding the level of word recognition, and you use a wide range achievement test or a similar word test to help you figure that out and pinpoint what's going on. Next is use nonsense word to determine whether the child can blend sounds correctly. Like, for example, you have tub, you would give lub. Lub is a nonsense word, but they can blend the sounds correctly. That's good sign. Next is listen to the child read at his independent reading level, which you find with their word recognition level, and it's important to note it's at their level. Do not make them go ahead. Next is analyzing the data you have collected, and then you make a plan and you set goals based off the data you have collected. A word wall is a great visual index. It has all the words the student will know. Add the words that are being taught and review daily, and it's a great motivator. And you change the words once you know the student mastered them. Like, it's a great visual reference to how many words they are mastering or how many words they have mastered. Word families and word clumps, they help teach larger words, contain words we already know. Like, for example, together is to, get, and hurt. That actually helps me very much. Another example is and, which is in can. At is in bat. Those are for smaller words. You can use them for bigger words like I have stated earlier. An emergent reader is you encourage a student to read every day, 10-minute sessions 3 times a day. Have your student read out loud. That way you can vocalize what they're processing words as, because if they're reading it in their head, they might actually not be reading, or they're not understanding what they are reading. Then introduce the concept of the silent E and use a fun way to help students remember it. Like in the book, it says the E is a bully. Using devices like that helps students remember things, especially if they do have a learning disability. For my reading lesson plan, I will help the student relate sentences to pictures by drawing them. Their vocabulary will depend on the book. They will read a level appropriate book, have a paper and pencil. The student should be able to read a basic sentence, know the alphabet. If they do not, that's alright. And then the questions are, what can I draw from this sentence? Does it make sense? Read a book and told to draw will help hook them. The purpose is to be able to draw pictures and make the visual representations to the sentence. Like I said, we're going to draw pictures. We'll draw pictures with a sentence. I'll read a sentence and they'll help me draw the picture, and then I'll ask if it makes sense. In an independent practice, they will make their own picture, and I will collect what they have drawn at the end. Next, we're going to be talking about learning disabilities through written expression, and this will also have a lesson plan. Written expression includes writing, spelling, and speaking. These three words are used interchangeably, but they refer to different processes of learning and development. Verbal evaluations come before evaluations of spelling and writing, because problems with speech correlate to problems with spelling and writing. And spelling and writing down ideas are different processes. Someone with dyslexia can depend on spell check a lot, but they can still write a book. So if you have trouble spelling words, you can still write down your ideas very well. Helping with spelling, you help them create their own word dictionaries. You can use a digital reader, which will read the word out loud and keep going back to it, and introduce spelling activities. For example, when I was younger, my dad had me write all the words 3 times and 3 rows, so I would write them 9 times essentially. Spelling methods we can do are saying the word, saying it out loud. Next is have the student repeat the word. You would say the word and then have the student repeat it, because you want to make sure they grasp the syllables and the concepts, which may be a problem. We'll spell the word and ask the students to repeat the word. Have the students watch my mouth as I say the word or say the sentence. Students will repeat the phrase I have written, and students will write the word 3 times. And then to make sure they're not relying too much on visual and oral, they will close their eyes and cover their ears and spell the word by themselves. So how can I teach writing? Help them by demonstrating the letter and where they should begin. Model each part of the letter. Like if you're making F, you would put the first line, the line that goes vertical. Then you will make the top horizontal line, and then the middle horizontal line. Help them by associating the letter to a word as well. Like you could say F, like in fish. Writing with older students with a learning disability and are older may not fully understand some of the concepts that come with grammar and sentence structure, and you have to be able to help them with it. And students with learning disabilities at this age are just grasping to put a space in between because they've been taught that consistently for the past few years. For this lesson plan, I'm going to help them write a letter. Depending on their age, it could be to a relative, or if it's around Christmas time and they're young enough, Santa. I would ask, who do you write letters to and why is it important to write letters? Paper, pencil, and I'll have a VIP where they can see the format out. I'll say we are writing a letter to a relative or to Santa. They'll be able to write in a basic paragraph structure. I'll explain why writing letters are an important form of communication. I would fill in the blanks in the letter model I made. Guided practice, I will help them as they fill in the blanks by themselves. And then I'll have the students check to see if the letter, what they put in, is correct. Independent practice, they'll make their own letter, but they do not use the template. They can use the template as reference though. And then I will tell them to ask them how to send a letter as a closure, and if it's to Santa, they can just mail it out, and I could collect it or mail it out for them. If it's a relative, get their address, help them fill out the address out, and then help them mail it. Next, finally, we're going to be talking about learning disabilities, and this is mathematics with a lesson plan. So some of it comes to lack of readiness. Children are at different levels when it comes to math. Some can count to 20 correctly and tell what mathematical symbols are, like the addition sign and subtraction slide, but that's mostly because they've gone to preschools. Others cannot do this for reasons. Some of them do not have the ability to go to preschool. Visual deficits, students have trouble writing numbers, cannot grasp what groups or sets are, have trouble counting without physically moving objects, like they need something in front of them. They cannot grasp that 4 lines can make a square, and when they're older, they cannot line up columns of numbers. They will have to use a graph paper to help them with that. Poor spatial sense and poor memory. Spatial sense is having trouble with concepts such as over and under, more or less, like they cannot understand greater than, greater than on the less than side, and poor memory have short-term memory. You can see that when they still use fingers to count when they're older or even as an adult. Why do we do assessments? Assessments are tools to gather information from a student and to find out what he or she is struggling with. It's important as an educator to be there because we know our students. For example, if the student knows how to do division but they're getting the answer wrong, it's possible they just need a calculator to help them. I have seen this. I've worked with a student before, and I knew they could do the problem. They just couldn't grasp the whole concept of division, or want division to be more specific. So I knew they just needed a calculator to help them. Levels of understanding. Concrete is understanding the physical part of math problem, and usually they spend the physical part like they have objects in front of them, like they know if 2 cars and you bring 2 cars and 2 cars together, that's 4. Representation is the next step, and students can look at symbols or pictures to understand math, like they can look at triangles on the paper. And abstract is when a student can manipulate the math in his or her head. For example, some of us can do algebra in our head. I can do that in my head actually too. And finally, my mathematical lesson plan is students will be able to solve a 1-step basic addition problem. They will have dry erase boards and markers, VIP, so they can look at it while I'm walking around, and beads to help them with counting, because they